there and welcome to this week's edition of From the National Assembly Senate. The highest legislative body in the land, which is the National Assembly, is still on recess, Easter recess, and it will be back next week. Last week we started by giving you some kind of blow-by-blow account on contributions made at a public hearing organized by the Joint Committee on Appropriation of National Assembly. We'll continue with that, giving you the insight coming from certain quarters on how suggestions, open, frank, were made in trying to see that the budget we have for the 2017 is not only open, practicable, but it will touch virtually the lives of everybody in the land. Come with us as the contribution continues.
I only want to plead with the presenters, our resource persons, to limit their presentation to, I don't know, not to give them time, otherwise.
What do you need to do?
To be town bound.
This is the first time in the history of the National Assembly to conduct a budget public.
41 billion of funds delineated to the Ministry of Health and its agencies, while capital expenditure amounted to just 51 billion, or 23%. This is a 79% rise from the 28 billion for capital expenditure for the ministry in 2016, mainly driven by the impending joint venture funding within tertiary institutions under the auspices of the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, amounting to 11.7 billion, and counterpart funding from international donor programs. Several line items were introduced that portray renewed interest in the health of our citizens. Some of the observed commendable new or increased line items include increased provision for health personnel, strategic investments to boost tertiary health services, nutrition funding, and an increase in HIV/AIDS response funding. Having identified very briefly these commendable provisions in the proposed health budget, we observed that there are gaps in the health budget that require the urgent attention of the National Assembly. These observations are benchmarked against the trend, commitments, and local need in specific subsectors, which we are about to highlight. Our critical observations for the proposed 2017 budget are the non-implementation of the National Health Act and the Basic Healthcare Provision Fund, BHCPF. Given that the federal government expects a total and the ambition are grossly mismatched with the need to achieve better health outcomes at a primary level for every citizen. An increase in health budgets driven by refunds and counterpart funding. Nutrition funding for acute and chronic malnutrition. Vaccine funding, again. Provision for family planning committees and commodities, and the National Health Insurance Scheme's operational budget omission and universal health coverage. Lastly, the provision for HIV/AIDS response. We thus recommend to the National Assembly on the 2017 health budget proposal, on the basis of our observations, that the National Assembly implements the National Health Act by setting aside not less than 1% of the Consolidated Revenue Fund to the Basic Healthcare Provisions Fund. The guidelines for the administration, disbursement, and monitoring of this fund are virtually completed. The 2017 budget should prioritize this, setting aside 49 billion naira as a statutory transfer. An increased allocation to the health sector to reach at least 7.5% of the overall budget in 2017 to progress towards the Abuja Declaration benchmark. The bulk of the new resources should go to capital expenditure to enhance access to equipment and health supporting infrastructure. At the current level, The total allocation to health should not be less than 5%.
Is going through now, but also what was long argued in both theoretical and empirical literature, that oil is a wasting asset, that we need to develop alternatives to oil. Now that the reality has hit ourselves, these words are more timely than ever. Identifying the policy choices available for our policymakers for the country at large. Now, it's also obvious, not only have we lost competitiveness in terms of exports, but also we have come to be major importers as a result of the oil-led economic growth pattern. We spend more than $2 trillion.
Better than then was Sierra Leone, Liberia, Somalia, and Afghanistan. In 2015, there's another World Health report, and Nigeria is still at 187. It has not moved one step forward. And the countries that are Nigeria is doing better than are Central African Republic, DRC Congo, and Myanmar. It used to cost 2,000 naira about 6 months ago. Today it's costing 17,000 naira. So the challenge is, even if you give all the money, that poor man out there who are 70% of the burden of disease in Nigeria, how do they access this health care? So if they decide to withdraw today, our immunization system will collapse. Efficiency utilization of resources. The international, what we call partners, commits about 5 to 6% of health spent in Nigeria. But that 5 to 6% of health spent in Nigeria, but they track their money, pays for over 60% of health.
Of this country. At the moment, we are still in the league of polio-endemic countries, which are only 3 in the world: Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Nigeria. Now, the danger of polio is this. If we are almost there, we're almost on the verge of eliminating it in the world, for all the people of the world. If the effort stops, it's going to come back. I understand that in this year's budget is about 4.6. Now the danger is after 2017, when it does come back, especially with value rebasing, we will be needing about 100 billion. We cannot afford to do that, sir. I'm just raising this to further raise the
in our lives. So please, I'm appealing to this gathering to consider us in that area. It's very important.
(2017 to 2020) is different from the experiences we have had in the last 12 years. In the following sense, 2005 to 2014, we enjoyed the luxury of oil price of more than $100 per barrel on average in a year. And we enjoyed export revenues of $100 billion per year, $25 billion per quarter. Now, the experiences of 2015 and 2016 showed us the other side of the coin, in which we saw an oil price of about $45, a sharp drop from the $110 that we were used to in the previous decade, and an export revenue of about $40 billion. we didn't respond very well to that negative shock because growth declined and we ended up in a recession in 2016. We saw massive devaluation and instability in the Naira, and we saw outbreak of inflation. Now, thankfully, 2017 to 2020 is different from those previous 2 years in that the outlook of the oil price is you find the money to borrow, you should say you're not borrowing because you end up just putting all your money in debt service. Investment is the only option. You can get more than $50 billion US and you won't need to repay it. And we made this point. Every opportunity we had last year, courtesy of the Ministry of Budget and Planning, the Economic Management Team, and even the Cabinet, when they invited us for consultation, we made the point that there is a global glut of liquidity. If you ask, you will get more than you ask for. Thankfully, the oversubscription of the Eurobond has demonstrated that. That is not that India does not have a monopoly of attracting and retaining foreign investment that Nigeria can if Nigeria asks. When Nigeria offered opportunity for foreign investment in telecoms, it's not quoted in the Eurobond market. It was oversubscribed, if you like. When we offered opportunity for foreign investment in LNG, it's oversubscribed. We've moved beyond the initial 2 trains. We are at 6 trains planning the 7th and 8th. So we encourage the Nigerian government to look beyond government revenue for debt.
Who ensures that the monies that have been released to the various ministries, agencies are accounted for? In other countries, we have General Accountability Office. In the US, you have General Accountability Office. In UK, you have National Audit Office. In Ghana, you have Office of the General for Ghana. In South Africa, you have AXA, which is Auditor General for South Africa. In Nigeria, you have Office of Auditor General for the Federation. But in Nigeria here, that office is completely ignored. It's not strengthened at all.
Also, we engage the budget office, the PMO, particularly the committee, the finance committee. We engage them to justify the reasons why they want to borrow in order to finance the budget. And when you say to them, you find that there's nothing abnormal. It's just normal way of the way countries are run all over the world. Countries, in fact, capitalism is based on borrowing. You find that debt, borrowing is there. It's very, very common in business, in capitalist system of government. So we're not going to stop the borrowing, but we're going to control it and also ensure that whatever is borrowed is justified. What will oppose is the issue of just borrowing for borrowing. Yesterday, one of the speakers challenged the National Assembly that we have kept the borrowing plan of the executive for 3 months. And we disputed that. I answered the question myself. I said, the borrowing plan Mr. President was sent to Mr. President, and we are still waiting for it to be returned to us because it didn't contain the details. So, since it's not before us, Mr. President.
All we're presenting here at the moment, would it have an impact in the budget that's going to be presented, or is it something that we're just discussing for now, for future discussions, or would have, what would the committee, both the Joint Committee of the Senate and House of Reps, how would it impact in the budgets that we're talking about?
As an intellectual, is just paint a very rosy picture about either the investment or the recent success with the Eurobond issue, forgetting that even the Eurobond was earlier attempted although under the last administration it failed. So I thought you would just tell us what made it succeed this time, and also bring up the issue whether the cost.
The health sector where I come from, I'm a senior resident, a medical doctor in family medicine from University of Maiduguri Teaching Hospital. Take the healthcare indices in this country is dismal. Please, I'm asking this House and our honorables, let's look at these sectors and invest most of our energy and resources and be focused for the next 15 years.
The little 18 billion that was released out of the 2016 budget, those who retire under the contributory pension scheme in 2014, 2015,
was just 18 billion naira. So these are the kind of things that National Assembly will intervene and ensure that that amount has to be augmented. As of today, the pensioners in Nigeria, they have over 193 billion with the federal government that has not been paid to them.
Accounts held by NDS through maintaining the treasury single account. Reasonable sums of money were accounted for in that. My question is to the Honorable Committee, the Honorable Joint Committee of the Senate and the House of Representatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
For the budget, the two sides got to have the resources, but question that we need to spend on infrastructure, and therefore the policy to devote at least 30% of our national budget to infrastructure spending is a sound one. A lot of us, some of the speakers
strengthen them. I believe that if government will do this, it will go a long way to make families to have reason to remain. That is my suggestion on that issue.
So a lot of improvements of geographical spread.
If you look at the budget, we can see we are trying to save costs here. We can see a lot of things there that, if we're serious that we want to promote locally made goods. So whose responsibility is it to say, okay,
in the dispensation of democratic rule in Nigeria? Now, how true is this? Well, we engage the salesman of the 8th Senate in person of Senator Ahmad Lawal, who is the majority leader of the Senate. Ahmed Ibrahim Lawal, you're welcome to this program.
Thank you very much.
Well, a lot has been happening at the Senate. Some have even called the Senate now the happening place. Others said, well, it is.
So I believe that that is something that is expected of us, and therefore it's not something that we could say we have made a very extraordinary, we have taken a very extraordinary position. To what extent we have been able to achieve that, I think we have been able to achieve so much in that respect, but there is still a long way to go. The long way is, as far as I know, one thing that we haven't been able to do is to publish the details of our budget. That is to say, the budget of the National Assembly. And I'm sure the 2017 budget will be possibly the first budget that will see the details of the National Assembly budget being published. And I will give the credit to Nigerians, to citizens who have been consistently saying they want legislation, very good legislation for the good governance of that particular country. And therefore, you need to attract the best brains, the best minds, the best hands, people who can do a lot for the country to move forward. I always say that when people complain that the legislature shouldn't have what it has, even though, ironically, people still complain that they don't know what it is. But I always say that we need to be really, we need to think deeper than we are, because you shouldn't be looking at the current occupiers or the previous occupiers of the legislature. You need to see the legislature as one of the creations of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, in which you elect people to come and legislate for the governance of the country in the National Assembly. And therefore, you should be thinking of the best. If what you have now is not what you want, you will still appropriation bill that suffered so many unintended actions and inactions. You recall that at a point after the president led the 2016
a foregone conclusion, but here we are again, still on it.
But probably hearing doesn't make it a foregone conclusion that the budget would just have been passed. But let me say that the process of scrutiny and departments and agencies of the federal government did not fail to appear. And therefore, they were given the last warning to appear and defend their budgets, or else the standing committees, and indeed in March, that was last month. But because of the so many things that happened that we had little or no control over, here we are in April. We haven't passed the budget, but we are optimistic. And would have, maybe after 2 or 3 budgets, would have been able to achieve that. So I will encourage both the executive arm of government and the National Assembly to work towards ensuring that we have our calendar months from December to December, from that first December. Our appropriation bill for 2017, for example. And when it is signed, after the National Assembly has passed, knowing fully well that when it will take effect from the time it is signed by Mr. President, you know. So I believe that much work is not supposed to be on the shoulders of the National Assembly. That is supposed to be the preserve of the executive arm of government.
Okay, let's now move on to one of another area where most people believe that the National Assembly, and then by extension the Senate, has really done very well, is the issue of the electoral amendment of the electoral bill, the amendment of the Electoral Act.
Should have, the process must have integrity, that Nigerians shouldn't be asking questions on how this kind of people emerged, or maybe even reduce areas of friction and adjudication, going to courts and you know what happened. Some people will be in office for years, maybe 3 years out of a tenure or 4, and then some court will just give judgment that that person was not supposed to be there. So the National Assembly sessions have all along been trying elections, because by the time you get close to elections, whatever action you take, you could hardly divorce it from someone saying this National Assembly wants to do this thing for a certain reason, which is not altruistic or nationalistic or patriotic. So I appeal that that committee finishes is in good time. And I must say that the committee is doing a good job. I've seen them going around the country meeting people. You know, that is what we have also been able to do.
Kind of, what makes it jinxed in the first place? And then how has this, the 8th Senate been able now to break that jinx, so to say?
Well, I think those who describe it as a jinx issue, you know, that those issues tended to divide the Senate where I've been. Development fund. It is most likely going to be smoother for us to pass the entire bill by the time we pass the first and the second. So I believe that we have broken the jinx, but we still need to finish this thing in time before the expiration of the life of the session of this National Assembly.
And I hope that, of course, it will be done.
Yeah, by the grace of God. Why not? Why not? The executive arm of government has shown tremendous will to support this policy of ensuring that we use what we produce and we produce what we use. And there's no better time like now, because we have difficulty with sourcing of foreign exchange. And this is one of the problems we face, is because we don't produce enough of what we use. So we end up importing virtually everything and anything under the sun, including toothpicks, as someone will always tell you. This time.
Some people have observed that certain sections of this country are more pushful in trying to bring out their indigenous products than other parts. Not only outside, but also within the legislative ambit. There is that conspicuous, deliberate attempt where some section of the country are being more aggressive, so to say, in pushing.
Even Lagos, who partnered with Kebi, for example, they are producing lake rice, for example. And therefore, I think it depends on the priorities of the state. If a state feels that it has a comparative advantage in the production of a certain product or goods, it will push along that line. The Aba thing is more obvious, because I know the Aba thing has been more production of those kind of cars because there will be more demand from government establishments. And the spin-over effect is there will be a lot of jobs for our people across the country wherever such undertakings are instituted. So I believe that it's supposed to have both the states and federal governments' blessings, and Nigerians should encourage local production. Purchase and patronage.
Okay, could the issue of other speculations or real the government trying to make some certain days as Nigeria, indigenous attire day, could that something like that help in the situation of boosting our local products, providing more jobs and so on and so forth?
Well, I'm not aware that has been concretized. I've read and heard that there will be, I think, a day or two of indigenous attire day. But I think we should go beyond that, because there are people who may like to have the whole day, the whole week, the whole month, the whole year using indigenous attire. So maybe we should make it as elaborate as that, and then leave Nigerians to key in what the mineral mining of our minerals across the country. The Minerals Act of 2007, for example, provide for the entire processes from the application and so on. But let me tell you that we have only been successful with mining of petroleum products, particularly the crude and the gas. The mineral deposits have never been fully mined in this country because maybe the petroleum became so dominant we are getting enough revenues from that. But I know that almost every state in Nigeria is endowed with one mineral or the other, and some in very huge quantity. Recently, about 6 months ago or so, the Ministry of Mineral Resources and Steel Development at one point was saying that nickel was found in commercial deposits in Kaduna State and so on. And so many states have gold and so on and so on. So what we need to do is to ensure that we provide the necessary support for our miners, those who, especially the private people, because I know that one of the biggest challenges the mining sector faces today in Nigeria is in promoting the mining sector. But that is, while that is commendable, I think we need to do much more. We need to give much more to the mining sector than 30 billion. And that takes me to the issue of the Natural Resources Development Account, where funds are there for the promotion of the All Progressives Congress, the APC, whether we are on the executive side or in the legislature. This is our administration. And when we campaign under the leadership of President Muhammadu Buhari, when we went around Nigeria asking for votes, we campaigned on three main issues: the fight against terrorism, fight against corruption, and of course, making the economy better through job creation and employment generation. Even those who are not in APC. The National Assembly, created the EFCC through legislation, the ICPC. Indeed, every conceivable agency of government that fights corruption, whether it's DSS and so on. So naturally, the National Assembly is a partner in fighting corruption. Similarly, the National Assembly appropriates funds for those agencies to carry out their mandate. That is support corruption.
Let's get to the relationship between the executive and the legislature. How will you describe the relationship as it were now? Many people are thinking, having different thoughts of how the relationship is or how it's supposed to be. In your own opinion, how will you describe the relationship presently between the executive and the legislature?
I'm not happy with it.
Why not?
Well, I would want to see a relationship where we are partnering. If we don't do that, the outcome is what we have. Once you create distances, then you allow every person to interpret what that distance means. But when you close the gap, you do not allow speculation. You do not allow for third parties to come in and maybe do things that will aggravate what ordinarily shouldn't be a serious situation. So I'm not happy today because I think there is insufficient consultation between the two arms of government, and I will continue to advocate that we narrow that gap through consultation. That whatever we do, let it be defined very clearly by national interest. And both sides of government are accountable to the Nigerian public. And therefore, I will urge Nigerians to insist on getting a fair deal from us as members of the National Assembly and as a government. Because we campaigned. We got voted into office on both sides, and therefore we are accountable to Nigerians. But I believe that Mr. President has set the ball rolling, a very fatherly and presidential
legislative matters in the Hello Chambers.
Sorry,
you have, there are certain days that are specifically set for bills, others for money. Is that helping? Yes.
For reports. Yeah, yeah, it's helping. You know, you need to structure whatever you do so that you have a standard practice. And what we have been able to do is to, instead of just mixing motions, then second reading of bills or taking reports, we decided let's structure this thing. And you can see sometimes we take 8 second readings of bills. We were not doing that kind of thing before in the previous Senate, at least from the 6th to the 7th Senate that I was a participant. So I believe that it's working, and so far this Senate has achieved much more in terms of the passage of bills and than the previous Senates. And it's not cast in stone. We are just trying to create a structure, and therefore I believe that we will be looking at it and trying to fine-tune it, make it better, and it will only be better because I'm sure that even though we have achieved much, but we are not satisfied that this is exactly where we should be. We still have our eyes for higher performance.
All right. Well, thank you very much indeed. We have been speaking with the Senate leader, Senator Ahmed Ibrahim Lawal, an erudite scholar, a politician, and a gentleman. Thank you very much, sir, for...
Thank you very much.
Well, that's the size of our package for this week. We'll see you next week, God willing. Until then, have a very pleasant day. Bye-bye.